that the mindset that you have determines the decisions that you make. It's literally just a mindset. So the first thing that I want you to understand is there's a very intentional, logical process behind the way that these decisions were made. I think a lot of people, when you look at somebody's life, it's really, really easy to say he was lucky. But all too often people think, oh, this is just naturally how things played out. And they don't recognize that there's a thought process or an intentional process that is super deliberate that actually got people into those decisions that they made. There was an expectation of excellence. And I think that's really important because a lot of people say, well, it's easy if you grow up rich. It's easy if you're around certain people because you are expected to succeed. You're expected to get a certain kind of outcome, and that's why you almost get programmed and brainwashed in the most positive way if you grow up in a certain type of environment. I wouldn't even disagree with that. But what I would say is that many times you are able to reprogram yourself in a positive way to expect excellence despite the circumstances or environment that you grow up in. What can you do right now, number one, to become intentional and deliberate with your decisions? How can you start to not just look at, is this better or is this better? How can you start to break that down into, here's the metrics that are important to me? So number one, you got to figure out what are the options that you're deciding between. That has to be a limited, finite number. If you have infinite options, you're not going to be able to break down what you're actually trying to measure here. Step two is you have to know what you're measuring, which means you have to know what's important to you, which means you have to take the time to go inward and think without all the other people's expectations, what they think is important. You have to come up with that. And then you have to be intentional and deliberate about actually doing your research and figuring out, okay, here's how these different options score on the criteria that's important to me. How can you set the expectation that you're supposed to do great things? You've got to put yourself in the mind frame. It's literally just a mindset. Like, I didn't realize this until after I became successful because I grew up watching these personal development videos. And so I grew up around this stuff and I kept hearing, it's mindset, it's a mindset, it's a mindset. And I didn't even really believe it. I thought they were just trying to sell me stuff. I literally was like, okay, yeah, you're saying that so you can sell me your mindset program so I can come to your event, so you can get, like, that's what I thought. But what I realize now that I'm on the other side of it, now that I've been through the process, is that the mindset that you have determines the decisions that you make, and even more importantly, it determines the decisions that you even realize are available to you. What can you do to start to brainwash yourself in a positive way and convince yourself that excellence is expected? How can you convince yourself that excellence is the expectation? How can you influence yourself to say that this giant big dream and goal and vision is not so giant after all? It is what I am supposed to do. If you're capable of more, I think you owe it to yourself, your creator, and everybody around you that you have the potential to impact. I think you owe it to all of them to fulfill that potential to the fullest and highest extent. So how can you brainwash yourself? Vision boards, audiobooks, go to sleep at night listening to Think and Grow Rich, like whatever it is that you need to do, visualization, meditate, like do what you need to do so that excellence becomes an expectation. So people always ask me, okay, why? Why did you keep coming back? Why did you keep trying out for the team year after year after year when you had these other opportunities on the table, when everything was going wrong, when it probably would have been better for your mental health to just take a step back and chill and not worry about it? Why did you keep going? And the answer is reputation. Now, if you think about how did I get to Michigan in the first place, it's expectation. When you think about why I stayed there, it's reputation. What do I mean by reputation? The reputation that I have with myself. The way you do anything is the way you do everything. That was what kept going through my mind. My good buddy Inky Johnson always says that commitment is staying true to what you said you were going to do long after the feeling that you said it in has left you. A lot of people think that they're committed when they haven't been through pain yet, and I believe that commitment doesn't even start until the pain starts. Otherwise, it's just a hobby. Like if you're consistent with something over time, but there's no pain or sacrifice involved, that's a hobby. That has nothing to do with commitment. Once the pain starts, once the sacrifice starts, now we get to see if you're really committed or not. It doesn't make sense to me why people don't take things personally anymore. Like, it doesn't make sense to me why you would say that you are committed to something. It doesn't make sense to me why you would say that you're going to do everything in your power. It doesn't make sense to me for you to stand in front of other people, your teammates, your coaches, your family, everybody who's ever helped you get to the point that you're at now, and you would say to them that I'm dedicated. You would look them in the eyes and you would say, I'm committed, and then you would quit. That doesn't make sense to me. Where's the personal ownership? Where's the personal accountability? You should take things personally. And I hate when everybody throws that word around. You should never take anything personally. You got to learn to be stoic and calm and don't take things personally. I take everything personally. And that's what makes me so good. Because when I do good work, I feel good about it. When I do bad work, I feel bad about it. When I uphold my word, I feel good about it. When I break my word, I feel bad about it. You should take everything personally. Now, you shouldn't let it destroy you. You shouldn't let that affect you to the point where you get depressed. But hey, if you break your word, you feel bad about it, you don't like yourself very much after that, and then it actually causes some pain within you that makes you want to change, then that's probably a good thing. So stop running from personal responsibility. Stop running from ownership. Stop running from accountability. Stop running from the pain. And embrace it if it's there, because it is an indication that you might need to make an adjustment in the way that you live out your values, your character, and your beliefs. If you really expect big things, all of a sudden you start to take your reputation with yourself more seriously, because you know that in the future there's going to be something on the line that's so much greater than this, and you're going to ask yourself, am I preparing for that moment right now? Or am I preparing to fail in that moment right now? In this moment, 20, 30 years from now, am I preparing myself to succeed or fail? Am I setting the precedent and the standard to succeed or fail right here? Who am I becoming, and how is that going to pay off later in my life? You have to have the expectations of what your life is going to be like in order for your reputation to even matter. That's why they go hand in hand. That's why it's so important. That's why you've got to have a vision. That's why you've got to have some goals. That's why you've got to have clarity. And that's why you've got to create the person that you want to be, and you have to create that person around those expectations that you have, not the other way around.
If you want to tap into that motivation, having goals and dreams is great. You got to have goals and dreams. You got to have a target. You got to be aiming towards something positive, right? You got to be pulled and called towards something bigger than you that you're inspired to grow to go get. However, that harsh reality of here's the regret that I'm going to die with if I don't do this and take that chance, you got to have that. You got to have something you're running to, and you got to have something that you're running from. Taking that first step was, here's what I want, here's what I don't want. And identifying those two things gave me the fuel that I needed to say, the discomfort of this situation right here is worse than the discomfort of just taking one little step forward. I think that's a really important thing for people to keep in mind, is that it's not like the people who went through those experiences had this superhuman ability to remain optimistic and hopeful throughout the course of that entire experience. Like we have the same emotions everybody else does. Everybody has those exact same points of struggle where you start to examine your own mentality and say, is it worth it? Am I cut out for this? Can I get through this? Everybody has that internal conversation, so don't get judgmental about yourself. Don't get down on yourself. Don't feel bad about yourself for having that mental conversation. It's a matter of taking control of what you do about the conversation and what you do with it. You put yourself in the mentality of, this is who I am, this is where I belong, and then you act in accordance to that, but it's not just hoping and wishing without the work. Because when you put yourself in those shoes, you start to act like it, you do the work, and that's why you get the results. It can be tough to do it, but I think that's why you've got to start saturating your mind with that mentality that you want to have that is associated with where you eventually want to go.